This meeting started if Commissioner Sullivan's done talking. You know I'm kidding with you. We'll go ahead and call the meeting to order, and if we can start. Do we have a veteran in the audience? Do we have a veteran? Would you please like to start us with the pledge? All right. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And it is a pleasure to have you start the pledge for us. We appreciate so much. And now if we can have a moment of silence and prayer, we ask God to bless all the citizens of Flagler County and especially all the men and women in the military around the world standing the watch to maintain our freedom. Here at home, our brave first responders, including police, firemen, emergency medical personnel, keep us safe, away from danger, and secure in our homes. I'd also like to include the people of the Ukraine, as that is still going on. And then also for our families in Flagler County, we just recently experienced a loss. Pastor Geraldine Denny, who is a very prominent person in the community, unexpectedly lost her daughter yesterday, who was 20 years old. So I ask y'all to keep her in our prayer. She is, I wouldn't want anyone to go through that. So if we can please say a prayer for her family as well. All right, we'll go ahead and start our meeting, and I'd like to welcome everyone. I'm Joe Mullins, the Flagler County Chair, and we'll go ahead and move to item number 4. This is the interlocal agreement for school facility planning discussion and presentation. And we'll go ahead and start with Adam Mingle. Okay, Adam, if you'll go ahead and start us.
A couple of quick slides that I'm going to go through, and certainly what we're looking for with this presentation is direction for our Oversight Committee meeting that's coming up tomorrow. And so what we're looking for from the board, talk about a couple of concepts. You certainly had much of this discussion before, and so we're going to try to hit several of the high points with this. So there's much that we agree on. There are a few things that are still points of discussion that we're looking at. Hopefully, I'm going to hit on those here with this. Certainly, we'll have school board staff follow, and they'll have their take on this as well. We know concurrency is needed, even though you have that optional language that was put in respective to schools, and certainly we've taken that step with the public school facilities element of eliminating that from the comprehensive plan. And ultimately, we're going to have pieces and parts that will come back into the plan, level of service standard that will need to be included in the capital improvements element, likely also in the intergovernmental coordination element. The key issues that we have, I think this is where we're boiling down still to the approach we're going to have with concurrency. Mitigation versus capacity reservation, de minimis development thresholds, impact fees, timing is what I've looked at here with the slides I'm presenting. And so far, our perspective from the county is that we've got some resistance to change on the part of the school district, that maybe their perspective is at best interlocal agreement wasn't necessarily broken as much as it was just too much. And so that the overall edits to that, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater kind of approach is what I think their idea with that would be. So this is giving you a bit of the schedule. This last column on that far right-hand side is the summary for those columns in the middle. And so the way to read this proposal date, and then you're reading across March 15th, you had the proposal start out at basically a third, and then 100% within the 14 months or 66% build out, whichever occurs first. And you had the timing there, 6 months, 80th building permit, 6 months, 160th building permit, whichever occurs first. May 19th, that had become 50% within 2 months of plat approval. 25 within 30 days, or the 80th 30 days of the 80th permit, or 3 years after initial payment, and then the 25% within 3 years of second payment or 160th building permit, still ending up with 100% within 6 years with that second iteration. May 26th, 20% at time of development approval, whether or not schools have capacity, 80% paid as impact fees at time of building permitting. And that's what we're calling that capacity reservation system. School board proposal, they've come back with June 21st, 40% on development approval, 30% second year, 30% in third year. So you have 100% payment within 3 years.
Mr. Mengel?
Yes, sir.
Can we go back? Carlos, can we go back, please? Sorry to interrupt. I do think it's important to add a little clarification for our commission. The March 15th, what is listed here as a proposal, that's actually a real-world example of a mitigation agreement that was negotiated between the...
I wanted to mention this, Sean, you're stealing my thunder. The GeoSam example is what I was going to mention, but that's where I was trying to head towards, but go ahead. Okay,
so at the May 19th truly was a proposal, something that I put forth for the working group, the staff level group that's working on this matter of the various local governments with the school district. And the idea you see there with May 19th was to give the school district a little more money up front, but then space the other payments over a greater period of time tied to the building of homes so that it more closely aligned with the actual impact of students in the school system. The idea was to stimulate discussion. However, the school staff did not engage or didn't like that proposal, and so that followed next with the other proposal saying, okay, if you don't want to negotiate those sorts of numbers, let's try a different approach altogether. The May 26th that proposal is what we're calling the capacity reservation. And the way it's written now, we have a 20% payment upon development approval whenever schools are at least 50% capacity as currently written. For all intents and purposes, 50% capacity is probably going to be all the time. If they drop below 50% capacity, none of us will be here having this conversation. Lastly, the June 21st proposal, that is an actual counter proposal from the school district. That's the current offer or suggestion that they've put forth, 40, 30, 30, or 100% of the payments within 3 years. I just wanted to clarify the timing of what generated those different ideas.
And from the school district, what we've heard, and they've been consistent with their messaging, is that their objective is to have as much money up front as possible, because that helps to give them kind of that predictability. And so that's where I think they've headed back with the counterproposal 40, 30, 30, gets them that 100% of those funds that they would expect within that initial 3-year period. That mitigation in that real-world example we had was with that GeoSam project. And this was a negotiated agreement. This was provided as our example or the template by the school district staff of what's been out there in the marketplace. This was a Palm Coast project that had its mitigation negotiated, 100% payment within 14 months or 66% build out, whichever occurs first, was what was negotiated there. The funding comes in sporadically is my take on that. Mitigation only available when schools are over capacity. Trips the need for proportionate fair share mitigation. When capacity exists, mitigation goes away. And so remember, this is the mitigation. This is a negotiated agreement. And then my take on it, there's a need to create more constant revenue stream. And so that outside of the mitigation, you're back to impact fees, and the impact fees coming in as they come in with each permit. Negotiated outcome, no predictable path to follow. And so if the GeoSam example becomes the model, then at least you've got some predictability. But we understand, what I understand, my take on it before is up until this point, it's been each development has its own particular deal points, its own timing. That's what I've understood to be the description. If I'm wrong, I'll look to the school district staff to correct me on that. But it's been this idea that each one has its own mitigation scheme, each one has its own timing. From a planner standpoint, my biggest goal is predictability in the marketplace. discussions based on business need, tailored specifically to each project, no level field to play from. Different yet similar uses have disparate mitigation schemes is my take on that. Capacity reservation, how does this differ? And so as we've heard, everyone pays, but some haven't. So how do you go back and describe that back to those then that in the past that they weren't subject to this capacity reservation system? With what we've talked about and our approach on this, as Mr. Moylan mentioned, everything's, if it's 50% capacity, then everyone's going to be into this capacity reservation system, and we think that's where we're going to be all the time. And so basically this will be the movement going forward. If we opt towards capacity reservation, everyone's paying something up front. As we're sitting right now, that's 20% that they would pay initially. And so that there's maybe an equity argument there. Why pay when there are no capacity deficiencies? To my take, it creates bigger initial revenue stream for the school district, easier to leverage your funding. And then also then it helps you with the time to begin budgeting for next project, providing new school capacity so that you've got that lump that's coming in versus your impact fees that are coming in as the rooftops are built. It does have still that feeling that when the level of service reaches an established threshold, you're going to be in the capacity reservation, as Mr. Moylan mentioned, 50%. Lump payment instead of sporadic impact fees, whatever that amount ends up being, ultimately is what would end up coming in initially, and then afterwards it would be the impact fees that would be the more sporadic payments that would come in. Should be more favorable to the development community. It's less upfront hit for the school district. My thought there, it creates a steady stream of revenue allowing for better capital planning. I think their counter argument is it's still not enough money up front to be able to fund their capital program. Continue on capacity reservation. If we do go forward with it, school district staff requests a de minimis standard, the size of a project at which no capacity reservation payment be required, with the order from 25 to 10 homes. My math, using the generator, I think that works out to be 5 students at 25 homes, 10 homes, 2 students. Again, I'll look to the school district staff to correct me on that. I think it's a 0.25 generator. I think it's a quarter, it's either a fifth or a quarter of a student per home. Is unclear what the difference here is other than just to lower the threshold. I'd say here make no change to the threshold is what if it was coming up to me. I think there's also been a mention of a 2-home de minimis threshold, and that's less than, obviously less than a student. That's much less than a student generated within the system. And I think then capacity reservation too, one of the points we've had with that, and we opted for a 10-year program, but it's a question of how long. What would be the duration with this? The 10 years we're referring to because that's the period within our comprehensive impact fee ordinance that we adopted for utilization of the impact fees. And so for us, it's easy for us to see then that if you had that upfront payment in a capacity reservation system, that 10-year period, you'd utilize those funds within that 10 years, hopefully coinciding with a 5-year capital improvements plan. And so then you'd have, hopefully avoid that situation where you're looking at impact fee refunds for someone where you haven't utilized those monies within that 10-year period. Remember, there isn't a direct linkage between capacity and impact fees, but the capacity reservation and the mitigation both are creditable against impact fees, so that you've still got that feel that's there, that linkage that's there that we can't avoid, that's in the statute, that says that if you're in a mitigation system, if you're in a capacity reservation system, developer still gets impact fee credits. School staff counter proposal on this was 3 years, and the 3-year coinciding, I believe, to the 3-year timing of what we would typically call financially feasible capital plan, that initial 3 years of your 5-year CIP. That's defendable. It does have the 10-year tie-up capacity of potentially being too long of a period. We were asking then, okay, could 5 years work instead as a counter position? Is there an alternative there, somewhere in between where we can meet in the middle? Continuing on capacity reservation, no counter offer as to the percentages that we have. and they likely won't do so unless it becomes something that Board of County Commissioners and the City Council both recommend pursuing. So for the moment, we're thinking there's no compromise possible with this, and we're hoping for some hybrid approach. It's my understanding, I think after speaking with Mr. Moylan and Sarah Lee Borissy, seeing some of the correspondence, I think Orange County actually has kind of a hybrid approach with this also, where they utilize both the mitigation and the reservation system. And so I think that's very much something that should be on our table as well for some options for us to consider. Impact fees touched on this. Both the mitigation and the capacity reservation payments are creditable dollar for dollar. If the mitigation is pegged at the less than full amount to avoid an excess impact fee credit, then you're really just still front-ending those impact fee payments. If the impact fees increase, developer is entitled to the same density, and so that's one of those concepts we've talked about before. And so that if you have that payment, and I realize it's got some issues for the school district, but that's unavoidable. This is what the statute says is available dollar for dollar basis as far as the way the credits work. And for the moment here with this, I think we're all kind of acknowledging that this is the system. This is what the legislature has approved. It's probably easy to say it's developer friendly, but so far there's been no response on this as far as our take on this, that really all we're doing is front-ending those impact fee payments. Timing, hoping to tie those payments more closely to rooftops and to stimulate negotiations. We do have those two goals with this of what we've talked about with the capacity reservation system. And the May 19th proposal was 100% within 6 years or 66% of the build-out. Again, as Mr. Moylan mentioned, I think that's been basically rejected by the school district staff. A week later, we shifted to the 20% capacity reservation. Now, June 21st, we're at the 40-30-30 type framework, all paid within the first 3 years. Maybe a good spot, I think, to mention where I believe the City Council with Palm Coast had left this issue, and I think they had their meeting on Tuesday evening, and I don't know if any of you had seen that meeting. A couple of folks, I think, were there.
I saw it.
But we had then, Councilman Danko, I think, had made comments where he was thinking maybe a 20% every year for 5 years. I think that was one of the discussions that was mentioned. I think there was, I guess a short answer, there was some interest in the capacity reservation system coming out of that meeting, and we'll have to see ultimately how Councilman Kloufas handles that with the Oversight Committee on Friday. We did talk here also about the overall timing and trying to get this done by September 1st. And what we'd like to hope is that we're all being active actors with this, and that trying to get this done within that time frame, realizing that to some degree this is a schedule of our own creation, a deadline that we've asserted here. But I'd also point at what I believe was the agreement of the working group, that it was necessary for us, as part of the rewrite of the interlocal, for us to just put everyone on notice, all the parties on notice, that of our intent to effectively abandon the current interlocal and start fresh. And so within that time frame, the 120 days was provided for in the existing interlocal. I'm still more than optimistic that we can get this done by September 1st. Key part that we've had, at least at both the working group meetings and also at the Oversight Committee, is, I believe, still a feeling of cooperation that we can meet that September 1st deadline. As we've mentioned, or has been mentioned, the school district staff has mentioned to us that if that September 1st deadline is not reached, within which a interlocal agreement has been approved, that we put ourselves in a potential position of the school district then denying development permits on the basis that there's no concurrency system in place. And so that when you're in that area where we are now with no student stations available, what you've effectively done is created no mitigation, no concurrency reservation system, no active interlocal. The take on that is that statute says county and the school district and I believe that's being read correctly now, have to be the parties to the interlocal, and others can join into it. But if the county and the school district are not in agreement on an interlocal, then effectively that interlocal does not exist. And so where before we've been told that or at least we've had discussions about it, where individual municipalities could be parties to an interlocal on their own. I think, and I'll look to Mr. Moylan to correct me on that, but I think that that's where we're at now, is that school district and the county have to be the lead on this as it relates to school facilities planning within each county. And then the municipalities then go into that interlocal and join into that, then for us to be able to accomplish school facilities planning. Yes, sir.
Is that a legal interpretation on that basis? Because I know that's not been the thought process. This is the first I've heard of that being, if the county and the school district aren't in agreement, then nobody's on board. So who's interpreted that?
I think that's the consensus position now, but I'll defer.
The school district may enter into interlocal agreements with the municipalities, and there could be a whole series of interlocals with differing standards. That would be far from ideal. However, if the county does not agree to a form of concurrency, as I read the statute, that means there is no concurrency for schools in all of Flagler County, including within the municipalities. This is a discussion I've had with the City of Palm Coast attorney. She is still exploring the idea, but her, I don't want to speak for her, but her initial inclination is that this is, her interpretation is consistent with mine. So we could have interlocals, but the issue of concurrency depends on the county being on board.
And may I ask if is there still an option to extend, or have we permanently put an end to that and there's no extension possible?
I believe that the option, and you're heading where I was heading with this, is I think there is still, much of it sits with our Board of County Commissioners, since we were the ones who enacted, the 120-day notice to the school district. We can certainly extend that.
If I may, I think there's no reason to think we cannot make that deadline. Putting the words to the paper is not the hard part. It's getting the meeting of the minds between the parties. So if we can come to an agreement, we can get the words written.
No, I agree too. It just options have to be on the table. So
Yes, sir.
you're not right.
With that, that was my last slide. I was open for questions, and so perfect timing, Commissioner Dance. Any other questions from the board?
I'm going to wait, I guess,
Yes, sir.
because there's a lot of other questions, I think, once we hear everybody.
Very good. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Right. Do we have any other speakers?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the school district staff, we got the presentation. Thank you.
Okay.
Good morning. My name is Chris Wilson. I'm with C.J. Wilson Law, PA, at 1636 Hillcrest Street in Orlando, Florida. I've had the pleasure of representing Orange County Public Schools for about 16 years, and now I have the pleasure of representing Flagler County Public Schools as well. So I appreciate your time this morning, and I'm glad to talk to you about this important issue. If you could go back. Okay. No, I know, but I was going to say if you could go back to your other presentation for a moment. Let's see if I have to excuse me. I was writing while he was talking, so I have to get back to. So let's see here. Did I get this right? Yeah. Okay. So this is the GeoSam example. And we talk about that this is it's not a predictable path, and each developer has their own deal points, and that there's some uncertainty about it. And I guess I would say that in response, that's what the development community wanted. They came in and the school district worked with them. The ILA says you're going to pay all of it up front. And there's deadlines in the ILA for when, they put an application in, how long the school board has to look at it. If they don't do it at a certain time, then the developer has the right to appeal that. So there's a whole process set forth in the ILA that does give all that structure, no one was following it. So I guess part of the baby in the bathwater thing is we have an ILA with concurrency, with structure that does allow for, there to be certainty. And the calculation is basically student stations times the generation rates, what's created. There's no magic there. Everyone can look that up. It changes monthly, but it's always pretty much the same. So I guess I just want to make sure it's clear that there is certainty and that the ILA can be drafted in a way that there is a process, there's timing, and the money is available. And I think what I'm hearing from the 40-30-30 that's provided now, that would be what you would put in the ILA under concurrency was you'd say proportionate share, and then you go 40-30-30 over the 3 years. So you would have certainty on that. I just want to go through it because I think if we look at what the county has put up. So I know we'll address this in slide 6. I will address this in our presentation too, but we don't think it creates a bigger revenue stream for the school district. The proportionate share is putting pretty much all the money needed up front, and 20% or 40% or whatever number is certainly far less than that. So it'll delay the time that it takes the school board to bond out and create that capacity. We do have some concerns over the issue of everyone paying. It seems like if, from a developer standpoint, if I'm a developer and there's capacity available and existing, and I still have to pay, I think I would be perhaps concerned about that. The school district's looking at it from a prop share standpoint and saying, look, the people who are creating the demand are paying. If capacity exists, then there's no payment needed. What did I do there? I'm not technically inclined, so apologies for that. 8. So this is the threshold. So currently in the ILA, it's 2 homes. And so that's where we're at. That's what's in the document today, is 2 lots. That's the current de minimis. And so we're not going from 25 to 10 or 5 to 10. We're at 2. And the school board's okay with going to 5 or 10. So I just wanted to clarify that point. Let's see, page 10 here. So you say no compromise, but again, I hear this morning and I hear in the discussion that concurrency remains, that, whether you call it I would think we would call it prop share, that's what the school board would like, and you do 40-30-30 payment over 3 years. That seems like a compromise that would work. So I don't know that we agree that there's no compromise available. I think that's all the points I wanted to kind of go through on yours. Oh, the last point is this one. So we do concur with Palm Coast and with Mr. Moylan on the issue of needing the county. That's for concurrency. To have concurrency in the county, the school board and the county have to agree to have that in the ILA. Plus, you have to have 80% of the municipalities, the residents of all the municipalities, 80% of the residents in the county to have concurrency. So I guess the impact there is if the school board, if the take is that there's no concurrency, or if there's not willing to be concurrency and the school board's not willing to sign without concurrency, then that puts us in the position of following just the statutes. Okay, now I think you can switch back to the school board's presentation. All right, so I would start, I guess, by going through the Florida statutes are pretty clear. They say the comprehensive plan, sorry.
Do you want to take a minute to get organized? Because I'm getting thrown off all over the place with this. The slides are jumping, and you need a minute, or are you okay?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Thank you, Chair. So the Florida Statutes 101333, it is the policy of the state to require the coordination of planning between boards and local governing bodies to ensure that plans for construction and opening of public educational facilities are facilitated and coordinated in time and place with plans for residential development concurrently with other necessary services. Such planning shall include the integration of the educational facilities plan, applicable policies and procedures of the board with the local comprehensive plan and land development regulations of local governments. So that's the policy of the state of Florida, is to make sure that we have residential development occurs and that educational capacity is available in time and place with that development. So talking about the implementation of the new ILA, there was agreement that it needed to be rewritten. The school district, like I've talked about already, would like to retain school concurrency, like to retain their proportionate fair share mitigation so that the school public facilities maintain their current level of service. As we've talked about, willing to consider the scheduled payment plan of 40% within 60 days of final plat, 30% a year later, and 30% 2 years later, with an option to pay early. The credits for impact fees are given when we get the payment. The school district would like to consider collecting those fees and utilizing a banking system or other system agreed to by the parties. As already mentioned, we're okay with increasing the number of units exempt, so the de minimis from 2.
Chairman, just had a question on that.
5 or 10.
Bullet. We're not saying that people who build houses 5 or 10 don't pay impact fees. We're just saying they don't have to pay the.
They'd be exempt from the concurrency.
Right, but they still have to pay the full impact fee.
Yes, sir.
Per unit.
Yeah, of course.
So if somebody's building 2 lots, the idea would be, and they've decided they're going to build them, the thought there is that, that they'll start building and they're going to have to pay the impact fee pretty much up front. I think that was the thought for the numbers. In other words, if you got a very small development, chances are they'll get built pretty quick. I don't have any big problem with that. I just want to make sure it's known that the impact fees will be paid, whether it's 1 house or 1,000 houses.
This is true. So the premise of concurrency is that public facilities are provided in order to achieve and maintain the adopted level of service. Government entities that are not responsible for providing, financing, operating, or regulating public facilities needed may not establish a binding level of service standard on the government that is. So in other words, the school district is responsible for creating the level of service for schools because they're the ones responsible for financing, operating, and regulating the public schools. So we had taken a look at, this was the 20% reservation fee that Sean had first put out. Looking at proportionate share, coming in, the projection was 51 million versus the 20%, which was 13 million. So I mean, obviously there's a huge difference in those numbers. And we point out here again that proportionate share is only needed when there's no capacity. And so if there is capacity, there really is no benefit to anyone, for the development to pay early. So this just goes through the total cost of the builds, taking into account the contribution from the proportionate share mitigation, and then the total potential bonding. This is the benefit to the school district having the funding upfront, more of the funding upfront. So how we allocate the funds. So this is in the next 3 years worth of budget and the breakdown between middle school and high school. The 3-year total with the contribution with prop share is the 51 million at the top. We have to use that money to provide the capacity for the school level that they paid for. So where you have concurrency, the comprehensive plan has to have principles, guidelines, standards, and strategies for the establishment of a concurrency management system, which has already been discussed. You have your capital improvements element, and you will integrate into that the school district's capital plan. So how we utilize the funds, impact fees are acquiring, constructing, and improving capital facilities, the proportionate share funds, basically towards the school capacity improvement identified in the 5-year plan, concurrency reservation fees, not outlined how we would use those, and any contribution is going to be given a dollar for dollar fair market value credit against the impact fees. And so this is if we don't have concurrency in place, this is the statute that you were talking about already, which is out there, which basically says that public facility services have to meet or exceed the established standards. If they don't, then the local government is supposed to not issue a development order or condition the issuance on the availability of that service. Education is included in the definition of public facilities. And so that's our presentation. I think the school board would like to stay with concurrency in the ILA, and I think we put forth the 40, 30, 30 over the 3 years to get there. So I thank you all for your time.
Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner O'Brien, Commissioner Sullivan?
No, not at this point.
Okay, Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, just a, pardon me, just a clarification of points. The whole argument between all of us, the whole argument is capacity, correct? I mean, that's what we're talking about. So what currently is the capacity available to our schools on a percentage basis?
I'll ask Patty to answer that.
I don't have the specific report with me, but we are over capacity at the middle and high schools currently.
At the middle and
In the high schools, yes, sir.
so that says we have too many students, not enough seats.
We have students plus all the current reservations from all the developments that have gone through the process and been approved already. And then we have a whole backlog of ones waiting and coming through. I actually have 3 going through proportionate share right now that are going to be approved, hopefully on the 19th of this month. I received 2 more proportionate share mitigation things this morning. 2 more developers ready to go through the process because they understand the process. I mean, it's a process that's used all over the country.
You know, what I had trouble with in the last discussions on this is tying this concept,
Yes,
and
sir.
I understand the concept, but tying that to actual students that show up. And I believe I understood the discussion last time, you don't have a method to do that. So if your capacity, you're budgeting for capacity of 100 students and 50 show up, so how do you deal with that?
So our generation rate is derived specifically from our county. It's
Right.
specifically our
I understand
students,
the
right?
calculation. I've
So
tried to work it out.
that's how we generate and work on our planning, just like you have processes to work on your planning for roads or parks or the other needs of your community. So in order to do that planning, we have to consider those reservations.
Right.
And we use the build-out schedule provided to us by each of the developers, and we adjust that annually. I actually monitor monthly every single parcel that's permitted in our county, and I keep that log and monitor that for growth.
You actually compare, and I know this is probably a stupid question, but do you actually go out when someone buys a house and moves in, do you have some way to check and see how many students are in that house?
No, sir.
No, okay.
No, that changes constantly.
Yeah, yeah.
But we do check, how many students are showing up in our schools and monitor
Right.
that. That's why we agreed on the impact fees to an adjusted schedule based upon the number of new students coming in.
Yeah, matter of fact, I thought that was a good negotiation and very reasonable. Tie it right to the capacity or number of students. And if you get more students, bigger impact fees.
Our
I
issue
like
here,
that.
though, is like with you have to plan new development. You have to have your resources available to them once they're in. So if we don't plan ahead of time and have the seats, we're going to have years and years and years of portables sitting out in front of our schools.
Right, right.
I
Okay.
would say too, in answering about do you check for students, whenever the student generation rate study is done, they'll go back and reanalyze
When they see
actual students. No, they'll know when they do the student generation study. And that's changed over the years.
Yeah, and one thing I might point out is we're able to generate a new generation rate annually, and we're happy to do that, but you have to realize there's a good chance it's going to go higher. So right now, we're using the one we used in our impact fee study, but we're more than happy to do a new one, every spring based upon the students, and we work right with the county property appraiser to do those. So we can do that annually if you would like that in the new ILA.
I think the issue is, where I was headed on this, is actual student counts, and you know that. I mean, you can, every year, you know how many students you have.
Well, I can
So
tell you,
that's- And that's
yeah.
what's important, whether that's going up, down, staying the same. whatever.
October 20 to October 2021, we were over 400 additional students in our seats as of October that had a seat in our schools.
And that's important to know. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yes, sir.
I really want to track real seats.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
My concern is, though, over the last 5 to 7 years, I don't see the numbers going up that drastically, but planning is something you do, it should have been already done. If we're at capacity now, shouldn't this conversation happen 8 to 10 years ago?
Mr. Mullins and Mr. Hanson, if I could address your question on capacity. So when you ask about shouldn't it have been addressed, over the last year and a half, Ms. Bott and Mr. Freeman have been bringing to the board the information with respect to capacity at our elementary schools. And the thing that you can look at would be, we have controlled open enrollment. School choice, we have 100% district-wide school choice. However, when our schools are at 90% capacity, so that means students are sitting in those seats, not projecting futuristically, actual students in those seats, we shut that school down from being available to a parent who might want their child to go to that school. If they're not in that zone, they're no longer eligible for that school. So we were starting to have, it was only one school that was at that 90% in excess capacity, which we shut down from open enrollment. Then it went to 3 schools. When we hit 3 out of our 5 elementary schools not being able to be an open enrollment, we realized we needed to make a switch. The switch that the school board made this past year was to change our 6th graders from being in the elementary school and moving them to the middle schools. That has provided that relief valve that now all 5 of our schools are available for open enrollment. So I think what you want to look at is our website will always show, with respect to students and the ability to switch whatever and choose whatever school they wish to attend based on our controlled open enrollment. Our high school, FPC, has been at capacity and not been available as a school to choice into for a number of years because we are at that 90% capacity. So I think that might answer your question of true students in the seats without looking at that futuristically. So I don't know if that helps.
Can you answer a quick, now, this is not my question. This is a question that gets asked to me, and I don't have an answer. They say that you have brought the capacity issue on yourselves because you created all the special programs, which I believe in, by the way, all the special programs. I love them all. But is that a true statement, that we lost capacity because we started the firefighting and the legal and the medical, which are all 100% I'm in support of. I love them all. But is that a statement that, because I've received 3 questions about that.
So only so many students can be in a classroom.
Sure.
And so when it comes to the size or the number of students in the classroom, those academies are still housing the number of students that are permitted.
All right, that's a good answer.
So that's not going to really impact it in that way. Yeah. Where you really get into the issues of a classroom being at lower capacity than what could possibly be in there would be with your ESE students. And by that I mean, so a classroom that maybe could house 18 to 25 students, with those ESE students, maybe you can only have 8 students in the room. So that's going to be your programming that is impacting the actual number of students.
Thank you. I can answer that question now. Thank you.
One quick follow-up. Now, the state plays a part in school planning as well, correct? And at some point when you can build and add capacity.
Yeah, I mean, we do have to submit our plans to DOE, and they do have to approve it, yes.
I've got a few before you go, Chris.
And one other thing I do want to let you know, with respect to capacity or the concept of reservation, just so you all know, our current interlocal agreement actually provides for reservation. It already had that in there. We just never were utilizing reservation. Reservations are, under the current interlocal agreement, only good for 3 years. And that is saying to that developer, they're wanting to guarantee that that specific school site would be available for whatever they're building to be able to tell their prospective home buyers, we have these seats reserved for you. It's good for 3 years. If you want to extend it, you could extend it. You have to pay additional money. Under reservations, it's for 3 years. If it's not used in those 3 years, it's lost. The money does not go back.
Yeah, and I guess I would say that's other counties do that. A capacity reservation is where there is capacity available, and the developer wants to get in line to reserve it. And so then they have the 3 years to utilize it. And I know in Orange County, they pay a third of the fee, over 3 years. And then they have till the end of that time period to either move forward or come back and negotiate something different. But they also have proportionate share, so that if there isn't capacity available, then they fail. You can't reserve capacity that isn't there, and you do prop share. And then they'll go through the prop share process and pay in a proportionate share. So it's a dual system, not just capacity reservation and not just proportionate share.
So if a builder was, he bought up all the capacity for his project, there's none left. So the next guy in line fails, and he has to do that.
Proportionate share.
Right, got it.
Chair, can I ask a few? Chris, before you go, can you go back to your slide that had the calculations on numbers that came in for prop share? Go back one more.
Okay.
All right, so under this scenario, when you're doing total proportionate fair share, are you basing that on the student stations? So is that the estimated fee based on student stations?
Let Patty run the numbers so she
Yes.
can.
What I did for this slide was I went through anything that was possibly in the pipeline for the next 3 years, from TRX, TRC, anything that could possibly be out there. So I used the same number for all three calculations. So yes, it was based upon however many units are proposed over the next 3 years that could be built out, and then what that cost was. So that's based upon the 5450 impact fee, and then the student station cost right now, not the projected one.
So your total proportionate fair share is based on, not on student stations then? It's based on the impact fee?
It is based on student station. Well, proportionate fair share is based on student station costs.
Understood, but we
Right.
don't we discount it to impact fees. So if you're stating
Well,
a fee
and that's why
based on
you'll see
students-
the impact fee right below it is slightly more than what the proportionate fair share is. Because oftentimes, particularly with multifamily, the impact fee is greater than the proportionate fair share because multifamily generates fewer students. So that's where you'll come into that, where it comes in a little bit less.
All right, so then the point you're trying to make, though, on total impact fees is still more than proportionate fair share.
The point we're making is that over the next 3 years, if we don't have proportionate fair share and we get 20% reservation fee, we will not have the funds we need to build the capacity. And so we are going to have portable until we have the funds necessary to build capacity.
Right, so this is part of the area that still needs to be negotiated if
Yes,
there's
sir.
some room to be able to work on this. I just wanted to make sure we weren't using student station costs in your calculation because it
Student
wouldn't be
station costs
accurate.
are always used in proportionate fair share
Right,
calculations,
but
yes.
we do show the comparison, so at
Yes,
least
sir.
that's accurate then. Let me go just back to a couple points that Chris made. You talked about predictability being in the current ILA. The problem is part of what I'm looking through this process is something that's more predictable and easily calculated, and there's trust built into it. We've had problems with in the past, the unpredictability being calculating capacity, projects being removed and added to the CIP, and a lack of understanding of the statutory requirements of prop share in the past has led to a lot of mistrust. So what I'm looking through at this process is something that takes those elements out of the equation so that it's more easily definable by a developer coming in as to what their costs are going to be and when, without getting outside of the negotiation component. Top issue still being funding the schools, so that still has to be part of this equation to make sure there's issues. Is there a follow-up to this, Sean? Are you going to do more after Chris is done, or should I ask all my questions now?
Did you have a
I
question
only
still
have a
for
few
me? Or?
Yeah, hold on.
Okay.
I have a few comments. That's all. I
All
don't
right,
have a
I'll
presentation.
wait on some of the others. The other ones I would say was, we're going to have an inequity situation either way. Right now, builders that built during the time we had capacity were not paying anything. They weren't part of the percentage up front. So the inequity being your timing as a developer, you come in and you're at capacity, you've got to pay all those monies up front. There's an inequity there. There's an inequity the other way, but at least it's shared with everybody if you go to the capacity reservation. I'll leave that for now. I'll let Sean finish up, and then I'll ask the others. Thank you.
Okay. I'm trying to figure out the question.
No, wasn't a question. It was
Okay.
just a comment based on your comment.
Okay, sounds good. But I guess I would say I think that there is a way in the ILA to put in, typically we'll have a calculation in it. We can put the formula in there for how you calculate the prop share. And will have timeframes for when things have to go back and forth. I think it's there. I think perhaps not just, I'm just going to generally say I don't think everyone was reading it and following it. And the school board gave in and didn't, it says you're supposed to collect it all up front, and they didn't. So I'm just saying that there's a lot of, if we had just followed it to the letter, we may still have been in this room having this discussion, but I think maybe not. Maybe it would have been, this is how it is.
But here we're now, though.
Understood. And then I think, what was the second comment about?
I don't know, but the one that just popped in,
forgot
do you
already?
calculate, does the district separate prop share funds from impact fees, or are they all lumped together in accounting? So
No, it
completely
has to be
separate?
used for
Has to be separate.
Okay,
capacity.
in separate funds based upon the school.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
All good.
And one other thing, Mr. Dance, it also has to be separate from our prior impact fees that were being collected, because, again, when we have entered into these mitigation agreements, we have been setting forth that we do not have capacity at our middle and high schools. Previously, the impact fees that we were collecting, we have been able to utilize it towards our debt service, because the way that our school zones are set up, they all touch, and so when a new home was being built, and hypothetically, if it meant that they could go into Rimfire Elementary School, then we were able to use the impact fees collected towards that debt service. So we have been utilizing old impact fees that have been collected to pay for the schools that were built for those students that were coming in. It was specifically for those, and so all of that, those dollars, that $13 million that we have sitting in that account, that money is being used to pay off and will be used to pay off the debt, because that was what it was generated for. I hope that answers the question about any funds we currently have.
Mr. Dance, your second point was the inequity piece. And I did want to say, so I don't know that I would think that it would be inequitable, those folks that didn't pay. That was the system that was in place, was that prop share was only there if there was not capacity. So that was the program. So they went along.
Doesn't mean it still wasn't not
And then in the other way,
equitable,
you've got a whole bunch of people out there today that don't have to pay anything, and they're going to have to pay even if there is capacity forever. I'm not sure, the people that actually are created the impact, and that's the.
Everybody, though, over time has created the impact. It's added on top of each other as everybody moves in. It's a slow process. It doesn't, eventually the calculation trips and it creates capacity issues. But up until that point, it's a slow progression.
Yeah,
It's okay. We don't have to agree.
yeah, prop share. We don't agree.
One other question. On your proposal, the June 21st proposal, what was the vote on the school board on that proposal?
5-1, or 5-0, excuse me.
Okay, they did vote on it, they approved it? Okay.
5-0, in case that.
All right, next speaker, please. Sean, you ready to go ahead?
Thank you, Chair. I do have a few comments, and obviously we're here for any questions. Point of clarification, the level of service for schools is jointly established. That's expressly stated in the statute, jointly established between the local governments and the school district. Also, a point that I need to make here is that the level of service has to be something that's financially feasible. According to the statute, the local government comp plan must demonstrate that the level of service adopted can be reasonably met, and infrastructure needed to meet that level of service must be identified in the 5-year capital improvement plan. Here we are, in the early 2000s, our schools were not able to keep up with the growth of our community. Shortly thereafter, or right about that same time period, we entered into this interlocal agreement so that would never happen again. And yet here we are. And you have to ask yourself, if we're expanding Matanzas High School to the tune of $23 million, or actually, I don't know the cost, millions of dollars expanding it. I think we're adding about 380 student stations. And we're told that will not provide the capacity that is needed. And so it begs the question then, if that project in your capital plan doesn't provide the capacity that is needed, either that's not the right project or the level of service you're trying to meet is not financially feasible. The numbers on the screen in front of you, or not necessarily this screen, but another screen we saw when they're showing the amount of money they need to build 2 schools. They have a middle school and a high school identified, I believe, in year 4 or maybe 5 of their capital plan. Is that realistic? Can we build 2 schools simultaneously? Is that financially feasible? Is that something that we should be trying to impose on ourselves? The current interlocal says that if the level of service cannot be met with the funding available, situation we're in now, and if the level of service cannot be amended to a standard agreeable to the school board and the local governments, then the school board and the local governments shall consider other capacity options, such as a tiered level of service, or to meet sudden growth spurts, or other things that are unpleasant like year-long school, dual enrollment, double sessions. None of that has been considered at this point, and hopefully we don't have to go there. What I'm trying to suggest to you is that our level of service may not be financially feasible. We have it currently set at 100% capacity at all school levels. We obviously don't want our schools busting at the seams. Nobody really wants that, but there is also the reality of funding. The statutes envision a certain amount of growing pains. You don't want to build a school that sits empty for a number of years until the students finally come. That would not be an efficient use of public resources. And so we would have a time period of portable classrooms around our schools until we hit a critical mass, till there's enough students and enough funding to create that new school that will be needed. That's just the reality of our interlocal, our local rules, and the state statutes. The last thing I wanted to say was just to highlight a point that was already made. One of the main points of this capacity reservation system was that we would have a system that was predictable and uniform, everybody can understand it, and it's easy to implement. Sort of a facet of that is also the fact that we would no longer have to look into We would no longer have to look with a skeptical eye at numbers that the school district staff are putting forth when it comes to student generation, capacity, whether those numbers are valid or not. We won't even have to engage in that discussion because it'll be left to them to plan appropriately for their schools so that we don't end up in this situation again a decade and a half from now. That's all I have. Obviously, we're here for any questions.
Sean, I think we've seen some good work done on this and I really am happy that, you guys and the business community and the public worked on it together with the school board. I'd like to have seen more collaboration and working together. I think we're in a time in the economy where everybody is conscientious of inflation, of bills, of money, and I would love more than anything to be on the receiving side and say, hey, I need everything paid up front. But on the giving side, I need relief is what I would say, and I need to get through these hard times. But regardless, I've heard many different things. My personal experience, I reached out for communication and guidance because I wanted to get as much information, and I received by Colleen Conklin a very nasty, it wasn't answering my question. So I really think we are trying to work together. And then I finally got presented on the sales tax some information, and I was very much against it. But then I said, you know what, this makes sense. Let's put it out in the public and let them decide. But I have failed to understand this through this whole process because I don't see all the sides coming together and working. I see it one-sided, and it's all or nothing. So I appreciate the work y'all have done on it. It's helped me on clarity with it. Commissioners, do y'all have any questions? Or
I have one question, just since we mentioned the school board, when the school board voted 5-0 for the 40-30-20 program, were they briefed on what the capacity reservation system was?
Yes.
They were at that meeting?
They were provided that information.
They were provided. Were they briefed at that meeting?
They were given the same slides that you have here today.
can you please come up to the podium? Thank you.
That's good to know.
And
because
state your, and I got, even though I know you, I got to ask you to state your name. and
Absolutely.
everything.
Christy Gavin, General Counsel.
And the reason I asked that is a couple of the school board members told me they weren't.
No, they were provided. So the slides that you are seeing that were the school board slides that were presented to you, these were the exact same slides that were provided. And it shows the 20% reservation fee on there. So yes, that concept was provided to them. Okay. It was explained to them. These are the slides that were at the school board meeting when they voted 5-0.
The only reason I asked the question is because
Absolutely.
Because of that
Right,
comment.
but county staff did not present it.
They did not present it. And again, the one thing I would say, our reservation fees are very different from mitigation. Reservation fees, again, are setting forth that we have capacity at a school. You are reserving your spot to guarantee the prospective homeowners moving into your community that slot at that school. That is what you are reserving. You are not mitigating the overcapacity issue at a school. That is not what reservations are for by statute.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions right now?
Well, I would just follow up on what the question Dave had. I mean, it's, if staff didn't present their position and have our own legal authority explaining that, it seems like not a fair presentation to the school board at that meeting. I have a problem with that, whether you presented it accurately or not. If they had questions, they should have had somebody who developed that system to be able to present.
We had no problem with your staff presenting. Your staff was there and never stepped forward.
Did you ask them?
Never asked to present.
Did you ask them?
No, and I wasn't
Okay,
asked to
thank
present
you.
here.
No,
I asked to present here. I wasn't asked to. I asked to.
I'm not buying it.
That's entirely up to you, Mr. Nance.
Any other questions, commissioners?
I've got a few that I can address, or Sean, if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead. Let's get it.
In some of the other presentations, there's been just a general question of the legality of the capacity reservation moving forward, and some have argued that there may be challenges. Can you just present that to your best knowledge of your research to date and with your discussions with the city council?
Yes, thank you. It is my advice to you that this system that is proposed is legally defensible and provided for in the statutes. In fact, our current interlocal has reservation fees in it. It is just another facet of concurrency. The concurrency statute provides for all sorts of exactions that you could impose, and it leaves it to the local governments to craft a local approach. We could accept land. Developers could actually construct the schools for us, for example. There's a myriad of ways that concurrency can be implemented, and this is one of them. I've had discussions with the City of Palm Coast attorney, and my understanding of her perspective is that this could be implemented. There would need to be other paragraphs added to the interlocal to account for requirements of statute. But I stopped drafting once I realized that we were at an impasse and needed direction from our policymakers, our elected officials. But bottom line, I think that this is something that can be done under the Florida law and that we could defend. I think there's other things that have been done up to this point that pose a greater legal exposure to us. The fact that the school district began collecting mitigation before they rezoned, before they implemented other measures that they were required to do, and it seemed to the development community to come on so suddenly. That presents a legal exposure that I think is a greater risk upon which the statute of limitations has not run. This proposal is something that can be done under the statutes if we could but come to an agreement.
Thank you. And in reality, based on the changes to statute, we're just at a decision of when we're paying impact fees, because they're discounting proportionate fair share to match impact fees. Now, obviously, there's still two buckets. If they discount prop share to just impact fee levels, that money is still considered prop share and can only be used a little bit differently than impact fees. But if we go to capacity reservation and they're all considered impact fees, that decision then is just left up to the district to properly allocate those funds, and it's not then identified by statute that they have to be used in certain buckets.
We would have, there would be some controls, obviously, on how that money is spent, and we could specify if needed in our interlocal. But I think the bigger point you made that every commissioner here should understand is, regardless of either approach that we're considering here, the total revenue to the school district is the same, and it's just a matter of the timing of those payments. It's a matter of cash flow for the developers versus cash flow for the school district.
All right, two more points. In districts, one thing that I worry about, and I don't know if we can, something else to think about though, is if as growth starts moving into Flagler, so we have St. Johns County rapidly building, they can't keep up with school construction. They're constantly over capacity and they just can't build them fast enough. I worry as our demographics shift, if we push, let's just say Flagler gets in the position where growth starts occurring, and obviously we have timelines built in to where we can continually review this process so we don't get caught short. But is this a system, if we're in like St. John's issue where we can't get caught up, is capacity reservation a viable system? Or does, I know their impact fees are significantly more than us too. So that's one way that they keep up, and maybe that's a future thing that we address. But for now, I don't want to complicate the issue, but have you thought about that and within this system?
Well, that's not so much a legal question as a policy one. However, I would say that the interlocal, the current one and the redraft that's being proposed, both provide for review and oversight, both at the staff level and the elected levels of our respective boards. So it can be amended. It doesn't have to be carved in stone if we need to adjust. Indeed, that's what we're doing now. But you know,
I think we need to strengthen those. In the new ILA, we need to look at how we are accountable. In the past, we let those interlocal meetings slide, and I think that needs to be strengthened. There needs to be more transparency in that coordination. We've done well the last couple years, but that's only because situations got dire and it forced us to. So I think if we strengthen those in the ILA moving forward, that would be helpful. Hold on. And
yes,
then the last one
Commissioner.
would be, I have questions that haven't been answered about the bonding. And I would like to get a bond expert brought forth by either an independent one by both districts, or someone, you know, that you're close to on the county side that can clarify for me that the system you're proposing is viable and for the school district in bonding and provides those funds. That's one question really that is keeping me from being kind of committed one way or the other. I mean, I'm all for, you know, simplifying things, and right now you said the amount of money is the same either way. It's all a question of when it's paid. So the bonding to me is really critical, and I need that expert to be able to clarify that.
I agree, Commissioner. I did reach out to Ms. Gavin only yesterday to try to get some clarification on that point. The school district or the staff has advised us that the reason they need 100% of these fees within 3 years is because of the bond market, what their lenders are telling them. And I'm just asking to look a little deeper into that for some verification and some clarification on that point.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Dance, I'm happy to ask our bond counsel if that would be of benefit and assistance to you all to provide some information on what they have provided us guidance on.
Just work with Sean. Thank you.
The only other thing I wanted to say is when it comes to capacity reservation and the idea that it goes on infinitesimally, no one has run that out. And what I'm saying, and what I mean by that is, in our current interlocal agreement, it is an option, not a requirement, to pay or to utilize the capacity reservation. So it's only if you as a developer want to have that guarantee that those seats are reserved to you. Under this new system being proposed, everyone would be required to pay a reservation fee of 20%, whether we have capacity or not. So they're eating up seats, whether they build or don't build. And what it theoretically could do is if let's just say our capacity at a middle school is there's 50 more seats left, and a developer comes in and says, I want all 50 of those seats. What happens is I no longer have seats available at that school anymore. The capacity has been bought up. And so that the next person coming in pays 20%. What are they reserving? I don't have anything for them to be reserved to.
I think the only point I'll add to that is that I think the 10 years is too long, and it creates issues if you're reserving seats that far out. So I think there's room to bring that shorter. I think that complicates the issue if that reservation is too far out. It needs to be shorter and let them re-up it. If it's a viable product, then they can re-up it. That's all. Thank you.
Next, any other questions? All right. Seeing there are no questions, we'll go ahead and move to our presentations. We'll go ahead and move to public comment. Anyone wishing to comment, please approach the podium, state your name, address our city you're in and speak away. You have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Chair, County Commissioners. My name is Sarah Lee Morrissey. I am a former school planner, facilities director. I had the honor of sitting next to Commissioner Dance when he was with the school board when we both served on the TPO together. I worked for Volusia County Schools for 27 years as their school planner and facilities director. I was hired by Mr. Sciamento to help explain school concurrency, and I'd like to just say that I think Mr. Moylan has done a very good job of trying to explain something that is very complicated and complex. And when this was approved by the state in 2005, most of us, yourselves included, spent 2 years working on this as teams, right? The county, the city, the school district, the developers, the builders, all of us put together major stakeholder committees, and we worked for 2 years to come up with these systems. So what you're trying to do now is revisit a very complicated system. And I think what school district personnel in the county, Mr. Mengo, have said is trying to simplify things in as concise a way as possible. I think one of the biggest things to understand is that school concurrency was never designed to be a financing tool. School concurrency is a planning tool by which all the parties referenced can work together to try to manage growth and ensure that schools don't get overcrowded. So I think what is proposed here by the county is reasonable and is trying to take something forward to make all parties work well together. I think it's very hard to take school concurrency and make it work in a county the size of Flagler County with the kind of growth Flagler County has had. Flagler County has had a lot of growth, significant growth. The school district has not. The school district grew this year, but it did not grow that much. In fact, if we throw out the year of the pandemic, 2020, the school district grew by 1%. Most localities will define significant growth as 3 years of enrollment increases of 2% a year. So we're not there yet. But Ms. Bott is right that staying on top of this is important in order to ensure that growth is addressing itself. So I think Mr. Moylan's comment, or perhaps it was you, Mr. Dance, the total money doesn't change. It's when it comes forward. And school concurrency is not supposed to be the way you finance your schools. If financing your schools is a problem, then we need to be looking at financial feasibility and level of service. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Good morning. Greg Blasset, President and CEO of the Palm Coast Flagler Regional Chamber. We've come a long way in this process, and I just wanted to get up here this morning and share kind of where we started, which is, if you remember, builders didn't want to have anything to do with this, right? They currently pay the school impact fee when they pull their building permit. So where we've come in this whole deal with the building community, and I've been heavily involved in those conversations, is, folks, not only do we need to be serious about school capacity and our future planning, but we also need to be willing to provide this 20% solution that that the county staff has come up with. So the chamber's behind the 20%, supporting the 20%. The building community is on board. City of Palm Coast, their meeting, I was there earlier this week. Unanimous vote to, when we go to the meeting tomorrow, to go along with the 20%. What I'm looking at is preventing a patchwork of local regulations. And this is a lot of the Tallahassee speak, right? Like, we don't want different jurisdictions having different rules because it creates confusion among developers. But I really do believe this creates certainty in the process. They will know what they're doing. Builders, when they come into the community, what they're getting involved with. And not only did we increase the impact fee, but now we're saying we're willing to give 20% increments up front. So as a Board of County Commissioners, I feel like we've really gotten a long way down the road. We're having a lot of these tough conversations, but it's helping us better fully understand what's happening in our community, and I think that's a good thing. A few things I wanted to mention is construction is 1/6 of all local jobs in Flagler County. So when we're talking about 40, 30, 30, or 20%, I feel like 20% is the more economically responsible option when you look at the economic headwinds of a possible recession coming later this year or early next year. We want to look and make sure that we're not overburdening builders and developers and making this an unattractive place to do business. Last thing I'd say is not all students come from new housing. And I think that's important to remember when we're talking about impact fees and the concurrency and paying for schools. New homes pay impact fees, but a family of 3 or 4 or 6 can move into an existing house and never pay an impact fee. So when we're thinking about the financing of the schools, to some of the other comments, I think it's important to remember that not all students come from new houses, so it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to ever get new construction to only pay for all this money that we're talking about. There are other financing options, and the last thing I would say is that I just really hope that we can all move forward on the 20%. I think your staff has done an amazing job of listening to all sides and trying to craft a solution, and that's kind of where my mindset's been on this too. It's time to move forward. We're getting money more earlier in the process, and I thank you for your consideration today. Thanks.
Thank you. Next speaker. And seeing that no one else is approaching the podium, I'm going to go ahead and close out public comment. And I just want to say 2 things real quick, and then I'll ask commissioners if they've got any more feedback, and then maybe even accept a motion if we can. Well, I guess we're not doing a motion on this one, are we? We're just kind of doing the feedback. Sean, you don't need consensus or anything from us today.
Consensus would be good. I don't think we necessarily need
Okay.
a motion, but Commissioner Sullivan and Commissioner Dance tomorrow will be attending the Oversight Committee, so they want to be able to provide the sentiment of our board.
Okay, so we'll do consensus, but let me say this right here. Again, I think all sides have made some valid points. I think there's some good conversation. I just fall back to the community, the inflation, the economy, and I don't think we're in a time where we need to be pushing people to pay stuff up front. This is my personal feelings. The second thing is we are we have people that are concerned about a rapid growth. It's common sense when you tell a developer they got to pay everything up front. Their time frame of getting that built now has shortened drastically to try to recover that money. So some of the things we're doing as a county and as a community can impact that speed. And I think when you speed up and you do things fast like that, it leads to not putting the most smartest growth behind. We certainly can't stop growth, but when you hurry, you make quick decisions and you make errors. So I think by looking at this and doing it the way many other counties do and say, hey, I think this is a very good thing out on the floor that we've proposed, and I think you guys have done good work with it. At that point, I'll go ahead and open it up to any other commissioners. Commissioner Sullivan, if you'd like to.
I think there are really 2 questions that we ought to vote on separately. One is, we had already voted earlier to end the ILA that we had and give 120 days till September 1st to come up with a new ILA. So I would like to say one of the points that for our commission to make is that we hold to the 1 September coming up with a new ILA issue. That would be one thing we could do today. And because I think if we kind of make that maybe we will, maybe we won't hold to that date, it takes the pressure off people to get the job done. And so I think holding to the 1 September date makes sense. That would be one question. The other question is, are we in agreement as to where the working group, it wasn't just the staff, but the working group who looked at this was represented by all parties and have come up with this other than the school board, the capacity reservation system, are we kind of in agreement that with some additional details, we could go forward with that kind of a proposition? So I think we have two things to talk about. I'd like to separate those two items.
I don't know that we need to, I mean, we've already made a vote on that first part. We can reiterate it, but I don't think we need to go back and hash it a second time. Once we've made a decision, we've made a decision.
Well, I just think that one of the reasons for this meeting was to
Yeah.
discuss all that.
I mean, I don't think it'll hurt saying we still stand by that, but I think we've already stated that. And as far as stuff with this, I watched the Palm Coast meeting. I think it's very, very important we keep this thing simple. We don't start saying, well, let's add this, let's add that. I think that's what causes so much problem in government when we start muddying the water. So I like it.
Sam, what are you saying there?
What the working group has proposed, Palm Coast started saying, well, let's do this, let's add that. I'm saying it, we as commissioners take in consideration, the more we start trying to tweak it.
But Sean said he stopped working the details of the capacity reservation system, and that some additional language is needed to make it legal.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about what you said. I'm talking about what Palm Coast was the meeting there.
Honestly, our job is to decide what we're going to do.
Right, but you do have to take in consideration your municipalities. They're big voices as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Commissioner O'Brien, any input?
In listening to everything today, what I keep coming back to is, a system that is predictable, that creates certainty as much as possible, that's easy to implement, and that, for me points, and that's in compliance with concurrency statutes and language. So to me, that keeps coming back to the capacity reservation system. I don't have any issues with Sean's plan or the plan that you all have drafted at this point. Whether it needs to be 10 years or shortened down to 5 or some other number, as Mr. Dance, talked about, I don't think that's not a major issue for me. But I think you're in the right direction with the capacity reservation system, and everything else seems sound. So I would support you guys continuing to negotiate in that direction as you go forward. I'm fine with that. So
Okay.
I want to let the other, I have
Yeah,
one more thing to say.
Commissioner Hanson?
Yeah, just in support of Commissioner O'Brien, I heard a phrase that I didn't like, and that was when the school board negotiated with the builders. That should not be a possibility. Commissioner O'Brien stated it very clearly. Whatever we do, make sure the rules are locked in. These are the rules, and so everybody knows what they have to follow, and there's not a negotiating period. These are our rules, and we'll follow them. Thanks.
Commissioner Dance?
Thanks. I just want to, I think we overuse the term upfront. And I just want to make sure everybody understands what an upfront process this is. When a developer submits the site plan and gets the site plan approval, that kickstarts a process. And we're not making them pay when they get site plan approval. It takes about 2 years for that process to go through their site plan approval, their preliminary plat. And a lot of the discussion and these approvals don't kick in until final plat, and they're eligible to pull a building permit. So that's about 2 years of process. And so that the actual liability for them is shortened because they start to get, a lot of them sell the property off after it's entitled anyway, but it's a shorter period than I think what everybody realizes. We're not making them pay when their project is approved. There's a long process that goes through, and all of the agreements have been at some point at the initial final plat, and that's when you can pull your building permit, and then it's staged from that. So I just felt I needed to get that out there. I have confidence in Sean and the process that we've started and would like to push forward with the process. I think there's some areas for negotiation. I just want the school district my suggestion is to be a good faith negotiator in this process. We have room to improve on that part. And you know, the deadline is what we've established, and just because in the past it's taken longer to approve interlocals and stuff doesn't mean we have to take forever to approve an agreement. We've set up a really good schedule this summer to keep on top of this. And I just want to make sure that as we communicate and are asking for information, we are timely reviewing and giving back information. And that's it. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Sullivan?
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate on the timeline. And the reason I want to do that is when I attended the last oversight meeting on June 9th of this year, other than us, the county, the other people there kept saying, we need more time to do this.
That makes
so
sense.
I don't want any doubt in anybody's mind that the county is saying hold to the September 1st deadline, because I think there was thought that was not a hard number, but it is for us. That's all we can say.
That's a very valid point to say that. So I think, Sean, you know, do we need consensus or do we need a motion?
No, I think I understand. And
Okay.
yes, the chair of the Oversight Committee asked me if the county could extend it, this deadline. And, you know, the
No.
only thing I could say legally is, well, if they chose to do so, they could. You know, that's the only thing I could say.
Let me do this then. Let me ask for a consensus from the commissioners of holding the line on the, I'll do the first one, holding the line on the time that we did in September. Our commissioners, are you guys in favor, Commissioner O'Brien? Commissioner Sullivan?
Yes.
Commissioner Hanson?
Yes.
Commissioner
Absolutely.
Dance? And I'm yes too, so that's 5, all of us, that's 100%. Second one is that we push forward, do we have a consensus that we push forward with the interlocal agreement that the working group with Sean, is that the proper way, y'all are the working group, that Sean has presented to us today? Commissioner O'Brien?
With the way, with Sean's outline at the capacity reservation system with 20% upfront payment.
Okay.
And again, the rest of the details, I think, you know, the group needs to keep working on. And
Right.
So,
Okay. Commissioner?
Yeah, I think we have to include the name of Sean, of the working groups. It's not Sean's, it's.
No, it's Sean's. It's not the working group. It's Sean's.
Yeah.
It's not the working group.
What Sean has proposed, what the county side has proposed,
Okay, yeah.
you know, however I need to say it, but
Whatever,
yeah.
capacity reservations.
Yeah.
I concur.
Okay. Commissioner Hanson?
I concur.
Commissioner Dance?
I'm good, but I'm not stuck on any percentage. I think that needs to be, you know, continued to be negotiated, but the system that Sean's put in place is viable at this point.
And I'm 100%, so it's 4 or 5? That's what I'm saying, because as we said it, it's Sean.
Sounds
So it's
unanimous.
5. So we've got a 5-0 consensus on that as well. So with that being said, I want to thank everyone for coming to this special meeting, and want to, just the next meeting that we have is Monday at 5 p.m.
You have your workshop earlier in that day. You have your workshop at 1 o'clock for your tentative budget,
I'm glad you reminded me of that.
and then your 5 o'clock.
5 o'clock. All right, and does
be here all
anyone,
night.
Heidi, if you guys don't have anything else, we'll move to adjourn.
Move we adjourn.
We're adjourned. Thanks, guys.